Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I am going to talk on Saturn, Uranus, and Chiron moving into new signs. And so my talk today, I was hoping to do a short presentation for you and give you some thoughts to carry you through. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of, I have to, okay, there we go. All right. So to begin with, apologies. Okay. Here is, today is November 9, 2017. And on November 11, we have the final of 3 exact alignments between Saturn in Sagittarius and Uranus in Aries. And I've got the chart up here. Let me just see if I can use my drawing here. I think that's not going to work for me, but let me just say that here, if you can see my mouse, here's Saturn sitting up. I've drawn a chart here with a 0 Aries ascendant to give us natural houses so that you can see the position of the planets. So Saturn is sitting up in the 9th house at 25 degrees of Sagittarius. We see Uranus, which is retrograde, down in the 1st house at 25 degrees of Aries. And I think we've all been watching this transit. This transit started at the end of last year. It was December 24 when the 2 of them, Saturn and Uranus, aligned. May 18 was the 2nd alignment, and now we have November 11th. This transit has spanned the entire year of 2017. It has also spanned the entire year of Trump's first year in office. When we have Saturn and Uranus together, whenever we have Uranus activated, what we have is an acceleration program going on here. And I think that in looking at 2017, it's been a very dynamic year. There have been so much going on here. And the way I've been describing 2017 mostly is in terms of an information gathering cycle. We've been exposed, it's been experiential, we've gone through a lot. We are learning and growing along the way. This year has had a number of dynamic transits. We've had Jupiter's opposition to Uranus. We've had Saturn square Chiron. We've had Jupiter square Pluto. These are all major transits, and as we can see that there's just so much going on the planet, and everything is important. Everything is a priority. At the point that we are right now, Saturn is a 2.5-year transit through a sign. We are finishing up with Saturn in the sign of Sagittarius. We are moving to December when Saturn will move into the sign of Capricorn, which it does. Sorry, I just lost the date in my head right at the moment. I will come back to it. December 19th, sorry. So as we finish up with Saturn in Sagittarius, we have Uranus supporting Saturn's journey. So Saturn in Sagittarius, of course, has been making the future very important, and it's been streamlining the future as well too, perhaps taking away some of our options and perhaps replacing them with some other options. So we've been working through quite a lot in this past year. And we're now at peak. So Saturn and Uranus are a very innovative combo. If you are, like most people, are ready for something fresh and new to come in, certainly this transit sets us at a peak for that. So Saturn and Uranus facilitate the ability to transition with greater ease. Saturn, and so, for anybody who's been struggling to deal with their reality, and certainly realities have been particularly big over this past year, Saturn and Uranus helps you now to entertain new possibilities for yourself. It allows for you to be a little bit more of a risk taker, to have a little bit more confidence, to say, yes, I am going to try something new for myself. So this is an excellent transit, and this transit, Uranus is retrograde right at the moment. Uranus went retrograde on the 2nd of August, and it will continue retrograde until the 2nd of January. And next year, of course, we will have Uranus moving forward. I apologize if I mixed up my words there. Uranus went retrograde on August 2nd and goes direct on January 2nd, just to be clear about that. So when Uranus is in retrograde, it is in Aries. Uranus in Aries has been really very challenging for most of us because we always like to know where we're going. And with Uranus in Aries, it's living at moment to moment, which is very difficult for most of us to hold on to, right? When Uranus goes retrograde, it is any retrograde planet is getting more specific. So it helps for us to get more targeted onto whatever it is that is necessary. Saturn correlates to our priorities. It is what is putting us under pressure, but it also correlates to the priorities that we have set up for this moment. So on a personal note, with Uranus in retrograde, in facilitating aspect to Uranus, this allows us to get more specific. And the relationship between Saturn and Uranus, that trine relationship is in disseminating phase. So the disseminating phase is a relinquishing archetype. It is one of being able to set yourself free, perhaps of something that you are outgrowing. Helps again with, as I said, transitioning into a new program here with a disseminating cycle. The disseminating cycle is one of opening up to larger, greater possibilities. It is a disseminating archetype, is really, as I say, future bound. And it correlates to the sign archetype of Sagittarius anyway, the sense and the feel that there must be more than this. And I think we can all say that we feel that, right? You know, so these two transits are excellent for coming to this point. Recently, we've had Jupiter move into Scorpio as well too. Most of the transit of Saturn and Uranus in trine has been working with Jupiter in Libra, which again, you know, has been really expanding all of the concerns and dynamics around the social context and social justice and evaluating in terms of relationship dynamics, me to me, me to you, and me to us, right? So all of that's been working. Now that we have Jupiter in the sign of Scorpio, quite recently been conjunct with the Sun, starting a new Sun-Jupiter phase, and on Monday, the 13th of November, Jupiter and Venus conjoin to start a new Jupiter-Venus phase. So the transits of Sun in Scorpio, Jupiter in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio are now helping us or assisting us to get more committed, right? Where this whole year has been, as I said, information gathering, evaluating, observing, listening to your own feedback, hearing what's coming in at you, all of these kinds of dynamics. These transits are very supportive. One other thing I want to point out about the Uranus transit is that Uranus has been traveling in very close association with Eris, which is sitting at 23 degrees of Aries. You see it right down here. Which is also retrograde, and it continues to stay very closely aligned with Uranus through the entirety of its finish up in the sign of Aries. Eris, E-R-I-S, the goddess of discord, she is an antagonist. And I look at Eris in terms of a positive catalyst. She's the burn the saddle stuff. She's the irritant that won't leave you alone. And Eris is in the sign of Aries for all of us. And that Eris in Aries, as I always say, is a dynamic of what about me? And so long as that dynamic is in place, because I think that we need a lot more courage in terms of being able to to have our breakthroughs, to break away from our old fallbacks and so forth. So with Eris there, she's a very frictional archetype, and she sits there and she says, I want, I want, I want. And so long as that dynamic is there, I think that she's serving the evolution, right? You know, she's serving the evolution. And Eris simply wants her rightful dues, right? You know, she wants to be included. She wants to be validated and honored for her own unique contributions to the group. So with that dynamic sitting in play, with this very, very nice trine to Saturn and Uranus right now, we have just spent a whole year in that information gathering phase. Want to mention, while I've got this up here as well too, that, you know, Saturn, through its transit in Sagittarius, 2.5-year transit, has worked with Neptune by dynamic tension in square. From 2014 to 2016, we've been working our way through Saturn, Neptune, Neptune in its own sign in Pisces, which makes it very strong. Any planet that is in its domicile, in its own natural sign, is incredibly potent. And so Saturn and Neptune in dynamic tension, and Saturn has been in a last quarter square to Neptune. And this is about dissolving the reality base. And certainly what has been dissolving for the collective, Pisces, which is an archetype of the collective attunement, has been now in dissolving the conditioning patterns that have said we must maintain, we must keep going this way, we must give it up to the structural dynamic. Instead, that Neptune has been a dissolving aspect. A last quarter square influence is a duality archetype. And in that duality, the last quarter square, and even looking at this particular chart here that I have with Saturn, Uranus, trine here, we also, as we see, Saturn is now moving into shape. I'll show you that in a minute, but Saturn is moving forward. It's not too far away from Pluto. It is in a balsamic phase to planet Pluto. We know that we are working our way towards 2020, when there will be a stellium in Capricorn. So Saturn is already working with Neptune in a last quarter square. From 2014 to 2016, the end of 2016, Saturn and Neptune were doing the dance. Saturn moved further along, further away from Neptune, but Chiron in Pisces replaced that transit. So for the year of 2017, we've also been under the influence of Saturn, Chiron in Pisces by square. And both of those transits, Neptune in Pisces and Chiron in Pisces, this is about resourcing and about sourcing in a larger, broader format. Chiron, both of them relate to the collective consciousness, or the attunement of the masses. And the attunement of the masses is that, it's all of us together, and certainly we can see that what affects one affects the all, right? With Chiron in replacing Saturn, it's become even more personal, or even more in terms of your own personal journey, whatever it is that you are bringing in to resolve. And Saturn, Neptune, Saturn, Chiron dredges up whatever it is that has been suppressed, or whatever it is that is now at its time as ripe moment for it to be accessed, for it to be the source that is going to help us to move ourselves to the next level. So there's been really very, very intense, I think, recalling, of something that your soul has deemed is of karmic importance for you to revisit. And these have been the transits of Saturn, Neptune, Chiron, Neptune, and just the finish up of Saturn and Pluto. Uranus represents, of course, their individuated unconscious, all of our memory pools. And again, the intention with Uranus is to bring some fresh life to all of those kinds of imprints that we have, so that we can move into a new creative process for ourselves, right? So we see all of these. So it's just saying that if you've been plagued by your year, or if you've been inspired by your year, we're now at that time is ripe moment. Coming into next week, the 13th of November, we have Venus and Jupiter conjunct in Scorpio. This is very good for sourcing, and Scorpio is an archetype of choice making. Scorpio is also an archetype of where we get to really do a dialogue with our own soul. So the desires of the soul now are in a process of intensifying and of speaking louder. Venus with Jupiter and so forth. So it's a very good time frame over this next week. Venus Jupiter on the 13th, and Venus trine Neptune on the 16th of November, facilitating the opportunity to open up and to resource and to source. So give yourself the opportunity to go into a phase of, to allow yourself to be fluid, is what the point is. Trine is not a struggle archetype. So if you can allow yourself to stay open to receiving, the vibrational force fields right now are particularly strong. Back to the Uranus transit, we have from this August date until January 2nd. I've been talking about this in terms of the total solar eclipse that was on the 21st of August in the sign of Leo, establishing a creatively potent magnetic resonance cycle that is taking us all the way from that August date into January and into the middle of February, when we'll have a complementary eclipse. Everything right now, the creative potency of the moment is particularly strong. Over this next week, through the ending of, through the new moon on the 18th, 19th of November, there's a really good flow, a really good fluidity to it. So you can be in creative process and get something out of it. It's a very strong time frame. But my talk is really moving forward here. Saturn's ingress into Capricorn, December 19, 2017. And so we can see the proximity of Saturn to Pluto, the balsamic relationship, as I was mentioning a few moments ago. Sorry, I meant to say something about the Saturn. Sorry, let me just go back a screen. Saturn's in the sign of Sagittarius and Uranus is in the sign of Aries, and both of them are finishing off in the element of fire. We have a very rare event for the two of these to be in the sign of fire, which is really a very wonderful creative influence. The last time that, and this will be the final time for the two of these to be in fire for quite some time. It's a once in a lifetime transit. The last time that they were both in fire was in 1927, June 12, December 10 of 1927. We have a lot of pretty important things that happened in that timetable. It was Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart and paving the way for aviation. There's a lot of change going on at that particular point in time. But for those who are born, and there's still people on the planet who are born in those years, it's a very dynamic culminating point on the other end of things. So this will be the last time that we will experience Saturn and Uranus in trine in fire sign. But in 2018, they will come into close proximity. Saturn will be in the sign of Capricorn, and Uranus will be in the sign of Taurus. Yes, and they will maintain a very close relationship. They'll be within 1 degree in about the latter portion of the summer. I'll get to those degrees in a bit. So here we have Saturn in Capricorn, December 19, 2017, through December 16 of 2016. And we will have a slight dip at the end when Saturn will move into Gemini, and it will complete its transit in December of 2020. For the year of 2018, we will have Saturn traveling to 11 degrees of Capricorn. There will be a retrograde from April 18 to September 6 of next year. So those who, the previous Saturn returns, we have 1998 through February of 1991. So for those who are born at that particular time, this is the first Saturn return. For those who are born about 1959 through 1962, that's about the age of 56 to 58 now, you're going through your second Saturn return. And those who are born 1929 to about 32, around the age of 90, and there's an awful lot of people on the planet who are very vital in their 90s. This is a third Saturn return. So these are completion transits. Again, Saturn is a duality archetype. It's completing a whole evolutionary journey while it is beginning a new one here. So in terms of the first Saturn return, I just want to say that that the first Saturn return is very, it is kind of like a Saturn in terms of it crystallizing and setting conditioning patterns, into it's kind of a cementing timetable up until the age of 28 to 30 as a conditioning timetable. And the second Saturn return is more along the flavor of the Uranus archetype, which is individuation. It is now the creative developmental phase of your life, and whether you are kind of tethered to the conditioning patterns of the past, or whether you're breaking free of them, it is that creative developmental phase or creative opportunity phase in that second program of Saturn. And the last, if you live long enough to begin your third Saturn return, then we generally have given it kind of a jurisdiction or a flavoring of Neptune and Pisces, but I want to suggest that it may be more of a flavor of Chiron at that point in time. It kind of brings up that idea of what lives on. It's the bridging of this life into the next one. At that timetable, we can be into a kind of a seen as a mentorship for other family members or other people in our community, but it really is addressing the mortality, immortality issues of what it is that one has built up for a life, and how the evolution of this life is the bridge building to the next one. So I'll just leave that with you in terms of thoughts. And just in terms of the dynamics of Saturn moving into Capricorn, that Saturn into Capricorn. Pluto is in Capricorn, so Saturn is its depositor. And we have Jupiter in the sign of Scorpio, which is deposited by Pluto, which is in Capricorn, which is deposited by Saturn in Capricorn, right? So we've got that transit going on there. Jupiter is in a it's on the cusp in this ingress chart. It's on the cusp of the balsamic phase. It's at 45 degrees here, just moving out of the last quarter into the balsamic phase. So we have Jupiter moving towards the balsamic phase with Saturn, and you know, Jupiter is our growth principle, and it is our search for truth and knowledge, right? Which we certainly have been doing at a quite a voracious level while Jupiter's been in Libra and all the transits have been going on as of recently. And this is now, you know, the truth of what your soul, Scorpio, wants for your rebirth, for your resurrection, for your, it's about, again, a larger exploration of what the desires of the soul are at the personal level and at the collective level. And I think we're being confronted almost daily with that, you know, really bombarded with it. Neptune, Saturn, Neptune are in a last quarter phase, actually a quintile phase to each other, which is, again, another creative opportunity to open up to something. And Chiron is in the last quarter square. So Saturn's very dynamically set up here. And by the way, also in this chart, we see as Saturn ingresses into Capricorn, Jupiter is at 14 degrees and square to the karmic axis as well, too. So again, these are, these are all calibrating, or they're all setting up for, setting the game board up that is going to be able to maximize on making full use of that which your soul desires most for your evolution. You know, it's really about facing forward. The other thing is, before we get to that Saturn in Capricorn, as we come to the end of the month, we'll have a Mercury retrograde cycle in December, and before it does that, Mercury and Saturn are conjunct. So they're conjunct on the 27th of November, on the 6th of December, and by the time January comes, they will both be conjunct in Capricorn. But they are facilitating. December 6th, they'll be conjunct again in Saturn. So again, that's really about getting your priorities straight. And all of these planetary energies are really working hard to help you to get clear about what is in your highest and best intentions, and then what the best steps are to take to actually get there. When we come to January, we have that 2020 stellium happening, but as January comes about, we have some of the personal planets and so on. We'll get a good hit of Capricorn in January as well, too. So we're getting a lot of flavor of Saturn and Capricorn. I like the fact that Saturn's gone into Capricorn. It's in its own natural sign. So if there's some goods to come out of Saturn and Capricorn, this is the timetable when Saturn can give us the most. So I wanted to offer you something here in terms of, what Saturn could deliver, how to work with the process of Saturn. Saturn in Capricorn, again, I'll say, is moving on its way to Pluto. It is culminating your karmic priorities of the moment, and it is setting new ones into motion. So, we have a time of manifesting here. And Saturn is about goal reaching, and suggestion here that you're reaching some kind of goalpost here in terms of the larger, bigger program that you've set up for yourself, and then, about today's reality as well, too. So if we are looking about working with this Saturn in Capricorn, then there's three different levels that I wanted to talk about with you. And the first one is a consensus level. right? Saturn is about consensus, right? So the principle here is to establish some consensus for yourself, to establish some kind of uniformity. And that is to, for you to come to some kind of acceptance or sense of something that you can agree with within yourself. One thing of to accept an idea of consensus for yourself would be to recognize that we have time and we have reality. And both of those are kind of easy to accept as a consensus, if you understand what I'm getting at. Capricorn is the archetype of time. Time frame, time spans, the mature moment, right? So that's one thing I could agree with, time. How about we could agree with it's timely for this reality to be here now. You may have difficulty accepting that reality if it's a harsh one. But if we suggest that the reality is timely, then we don't fight against it. We accept it, we work with it, then we can work within the parameters, right? So I think that is a way of perhaps reframing it, coming to some kind of inner judgment, accepting that this timetable or this reality is the authority that you need to conform with, right? So I'll just let that kind of sit with you there. I might be able to accept that, because when we fight against the reality, we waste an awful lot of precious energy, I think. And then, to going to the next level, what I say is kind of the individuated level, right? Is, this is something that you can take charge of. Now, if time and reality are the authority, then what kind of function can I have independent of that or within that? So within that time, space, reality, I have to function. And functioning is my individual application or my individual role to play here. So if you can leave things as they are outwardly, whatever it is, the job, the relationship that you're having a hard time, or the setup that you're having a hard time coping with. And then inwardly, you can allow yourself to feel your way along a new process or a new way of manifesting. That's like inwardly entertaining the ideas. We are always creating our realities. So we could leave the reality as is outside, but we could explore and experiment with trying a new self on for size, or trying, walking around a new dynamic for self. If you can spend some time doing that, you may be able to gather up enough energy. So the first thing is that you might feel weak and not be able to do battle with the outside forces, but you could entertain possibilities for yourself. The more you build up that kind of inner resource, feeling your way along a new program, along a new goal, or a new way of exerting control, a new way of claiming your status, or a new way of creating some kind of influence on your environment, then this is going to get you started. If we go to level 2, with that, it is moving into a more intensified state of actually breaking up the concrete, or busting up the concrete, and that means to take radical action. Right now, Saturn and Uranus are in trine, so radical isn't so scary at this point in time. But if you can't quite get yourself to make a sweeping change, then, with the Capricorn, you can take one step. One step will lead to 2 steps, which will lead to 3 steps. So um, in that process of taking a degree of separation from the reality, it is to see yourself in doing something that you might think is radical for yourself, or something that would be really, kind of, as I said, busting up the concrete, could get you to some place that you might surprise yourself that it could actually solidify quite quickly. And this is especially next year when Uranus is in Taurus and Saturn is in Capricorn, and the two of them are working together again. The idea of something that is really outrageous for yourself to try, you might find is actually quite natural, and something that you might find that other people are looking at you saying, wow, it's it really suits you, it really fits for you, it really seems like you're coming into your own, and so on and so forth. It's like that. So by the time you get to that piece of it, if you allow yourself to go in these, first to entertain the possibilities inwardly, secondarily to take a risk, and it's more along the lines of something that you've wanted to do all along. We've been working on it for a length of time here, but I'll say that that as you reach out for it, you might find that it's not so new, that you've actually been processing and working with it for quite some time. And in the last phase of that creative component here of working with Saturn, it is kind of moving into a phase of contribution. So, it is about you taking charge and recognizing that the work that you do is actually the reward in itself, and if you give, you gain. So, you get to this point of where you work your way through the process and come to the point of where you can feel that that you have arrived at a time has come moment. It's, an idea whose time has come. These things that, when all of a sudden you kind of burst open and kind of go, oh, Jesus, I think I'm going to do this. And it works out, wonderfully, and you end up in your creative flow. It isn't really something that is actually an overnight event. It's something that's long been in the works. And if you can recognize that Saturn itself, getting to Saturn in Capricorn, has been long in the works. It's been 30 years. It's getting to 30 years in the works. You're getting to a point now where it is right for that aha moment to take place, right? So know that is that is for you. And I was just thinking about these in terms of the levels of consensus and individuated and spiritual, and when we're in that individuated level here, it is really for some leadership to take place in terms of moving the collective along, moving the consensus along. And this is this category now for each one of us to be creators, right? For those who are in the spiritual evolutionary state, it is to really get grounded with the spiritual path that you are on. And in terms of this, I think of those on a spiritual path, it is your spiritual duty is also your civic duty. And in terms of that, I mean, participating in a more active way, in a more contributing way, where we're actually, kind of able to see more results of our dedication to the spiritual path, right, in whatever way, shape, or form. That's something that I think for those on a spiritual path, it is naturally going to appear. The Capricorn archetype, it's a builder archetype. It is shaping and it's building. So I think that at all these various levels, no matter what, evolutionary state you might find yourself in, that you will find more tangible avenues in which to be able to create and to be on purpose for where you are at in your own individual journey, and then how you show up and contribute to the collective as a whole, right? Okay. So just say that, you know, for those in a spiritual state, I would think that the intensification of must do, you know, how you're compelled to show up, will be, you know, kind of molded and shaped in some more defined way as we move forward in terms of service to the whole. So let me move forward here. Okay. So all right. Uranus moves into Taurus May 15 of 2018. And Uranus is about a 7-year time transit. It will stay in Uranus till April 25th of 2026. From November 6th of 2018 through May 9 of 2019, it's going to dip back into Aries. So it will be solidly into Taurus by May 9 of 2019, but we'll get a flavor of it next year. It will be retrograde from August of 2018 through until January of 2019. But while Uranus is in Taurus, you know, this is, you know, an 84-year transit. So again, you know, we only have Uranus through a sign once in our lifetime, which is quite something. So Uranus in Taurus will again accelerate everything to do with our survival. Taurus, right? You know, accelerate everything that has to do with our with everything that has value and meaning, right? You know, our essential survival. Money is rapidly shifting. That's one thing that Uranus in Aries is. Taurus is about money, right? You know, so we've got that. It's a new way of manifesting, a new way of surviving, a new way of thriving. We've got the biological, the geophysical, you know, we've got agriculture, we've got fertility, we've got the biosphere. Uranus represents the social zeitgeist of the moment, right? You know, and we see, you know, what's taking place on the planet. What we value, what we invent, what we create, you know, this is all moving into something completely new. And I think it's about time. I think that we're in the throes of that right now. And if you are really, say that if you're just really watching what's going on out there in the world, we're seeing all of this now, right? We're seeing all of it now. Fertility and sterility, you know, that's the Uranus and Taurus archetype here. The last time Uranus entered Aries, it was a pretty big blast. You know, we had something quite big. Uranus will slip into Taurus while we've got that Saturn up there. So whether it's going to be as big a dramatic moving forward as it had been with Uranus into Aries remains to be seen. Uranus Aries is a cardinal archetype. But I think we can see that our survival on the planet is being threatened. And I do think that we're right now looking to find life out there in our solar system and to think about colonizing other planets and so forth. And I think that that will advance while we've got Saturn moving through this. You know, we have, we can see how that is really moving at quite an extreme level. The previous Uranus and Taurus left an indelible mark on the collective. That was 1934 to 42, the Holocaust and Hitler and the Great Depression and drought and famine and World War II. You know, it was a very precarious time for being alive on the planet. So, and we have again today the threat to our survival happening from man, happening from our atmospheric conditions, happening at all levels, right? And at the same time, we have great inventions that are coming into being as well too. Uranus in Taurus is really kind of interesting as well too, in terms of you know, how sexuality is evolving as well too, and we have gender fluidity now. You know, and many people with transgender and so on. And I think that this is kind of a bigger, larger expression, or a bigger, larger mutation of our species, right? We have extinction, and perhaps we'll have new life forms coming in during this Uranus and Taurus archetype, which is quite interesting. And then finally, moving to Chiron and Aries. And Chiron and Aries starts on April 17 of 2018 and will go to April 14 of 2027. So Chiron's longest transits are through Pisces and through Aries. And some of the things I said for Uranus in Aries, I think also apply to Chiron in Aries. So we have, if you're born 1968 to 1977, then you will be experiencing your Chiron return as well too. And I think that Chiron in Aries, is really groundbreaking in many ways. And there's two things that happen when Chiron is in Aries, is that there's a modernization that takes place, and that there is a modernization that helps us to live better and live more conveniently. And at the same time, there is advance of our humanity and so forth. Looking back at the generation before, when that was, sorry, I'm just trying to find my note here. Back in the 1920s, it was 1920s, 1918 and 1927. During that time was the Roaring Twenties, and I did some research for a lecture I did previously, and the transgender movement was actually starting in the 1920s. Interestingly, that was the flappers in the Roaring Twenties, and women cutting their hair short and men cutting off their beards, and so on. It was at that time that women got the right to vote, and also that Native Americans became citizens, which is interesting. And also during that time, the KKK was formed, right? So we've got kind of both ends of things during that era, the 1918 and 1927, and there's some of Chiron or Uranus and Aries during that time frame as well too. The modernization of people owned cars and radios and phones for the first time, so that modernized life, right? So we have both ends of the spectrum. Chiron and Aries is certainly adding to the speed at which we are going to be moving into a whole new reality for ourselves. And again, Chiron and Aries is really another emancipation archetype. So as Uranus finishes up in Aries, Chiron comes in to extend the Aries journey for the next several years, right? So we've got a lot of breaking new ground to do yet with our transits that are happening. So in moving forward, and just in conclusion, I was wanted to say that in a year when we have so much major planetary change, we've got 3 outer planets doing change. It is to be expected that we are in for a big year, in for a lot of accelerated growth for ourselves. And if you in particular are trying to do something new and make big changes in your life, and you haven't figured out what those are yet, if you have come up with a seed of something, then these transits are going to support you to move forward quite quickly into establishing a very solid foundation from which you can build. If you have not yet come up with the key to how to proceed next, is say wait until these transits actually move into their new signs, because what you're trying to plan for now, you have no idea by the time these planets move into their new signs, you will be drawing from new information from within your soul and from within the environmental conditions. So I'll say that not to stress if you haven't quite been able to figure out what your next best may be. That give it time, as I was saying earlier about the 3 stages of working with Saturn in Capricorn. Continue to function in your normal life as you would normally function, but inwardly live with yourself in some kind of experimental way. Entertain new ideas, like, write yourself some scripts, and play them out. I'm great at creative visualization. I love that because that's very informing as you are watching yourself walking around a particular scenario. That will inform you, and it will tell you whether yay or nay for you. And the more you explore that kind of concept, the more you will either bring it into being because it is the right direction for you, or the better you will short form your choice makings. So I think I've come to the end. I only meant to very briefly give you a little synopsis of what is coming for this next year. And I thank you for participating with me today.
Thank you. Bye.
Great. Thank you so much, Rose. Thank you. Could you please click on share at the top of the screen?
Stop share. And by the way, I just in case you need to see these
Sure.
things that I've written up here. Yes, I will stop sharing. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, Rose, will you take a few questions or shall we just wind it down?
I actually have a reading to do. If there's any really burning question, I will answer it, but I actually have to jump into a client pretty soon.
Okay, no worries. We'll wind down now. Thank you so much from all of us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rose.
Thanks, Rose.